lately, so it's been pretty good. Of course, it's been working pretty reliably. There we go. Five, four, three, two, one. I'm John Miglash for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Went down a few registers. So anyway, let's dig right into the news. But before we do, as always, we have a little bit of fun. And here we go.
Domino, yolo, re, ha, hooty. Yori, yori, yo.
50% off pizza when you spend £30 or more online.
Domino,
Okay, so anyway, this week we've delved into the use of humor, and that humorous ads tend to do better, actually, a little better than not humorous. I believe now that Domino's, at least in the UK, is taking orders via Yodel, and so if you're into that, away you go. Let's get over to the regular news. Okay, so how does your direct mail feel? This is from Summer Gould, my friend, and I really like the way she started this out. The tactile nature of direct mail is a huge asset when used correctly. Did you know that human fingertips are probably the most sensitive skin areas in the animal world? They can feel the difference between a smooth surface and one with a pattern embedded just 3 nm deep. I don't know what that is, nanometers? It's very small. I'm pretty sure. This is due to epidermal ridges on the surface of the fingertips. So your fingerprint has a function, and it allows better tactile response. It probably also lets the nerves, gives you a higher number of nerve sensors per square millimeter or something like that. Anyway, which allows humans to differentiate a wide range of textures, materials, temperatures, and pressures. Yeah, something you take for granted almost every day. So, to get the most out of direct mail, we should add texture to quickly engage prospects and customers. And right off the bat, I always have something to add. Whether you add texture or you don't, your direct mail will have texture. The type of paper that you have in your, this is a greeting card from Joanne Gore. Yeah, that's right, Joanne. So you got an uncoated card stock there. But whether or not you coat it or don't coat it or whatever, you will be sending a message. So the first point is you're going to send a message with mail that is not available in digital, right? You just don't have it. So right off the bat, mail elevates engagement through touch. And according to the CEPI study and their neural study, your brain has 10 times the receptors for touch that it does for sight. So you are sending a message. Now, lots of types of coatings can even enhance the message. Raised, I love that when that first came out, raised ink on business cards, and you could feel the texture on there. Of course, embossing, you can still emboss. It is around. You can add a rough sandpaper feel. Soft touch is like a latex coating. It feels velvety. Etch coat creates fine line patterns. There's all kinds of these things. Now, as always, I say test this because, I did work for General Binding Corporation, GBC, and I helped them launch a catalog, which is up on the wall behind me. But they sent me a mailing piece that they had done on their own without me, and they'd mailed out 150,000 pieces and gotten like 3 leads. They were selling the laminating equipment, and so they laminated it. So it was a plastic coating. It could have been all varnish. I always like spot varnish because spot varnish. Here's a couple of more. Full varnish, the whole thing feels like plastic coated. You can actually plastic coat it. I don't think they did though. Um, and sometimes you hit varnish and then you give it UV light to harden it. There's all kinds of methodologies. And one of the things that these textures do is they'll limit the number of printers you can go get quotes from, because only so many printers do, there's probably aren't very many that do all of these, and there's some that do this and some that do that, which means if you're committed to one kind of coding or another, you're going to be limiting your print options. Now, the way I approach it almost always is the opposite. I say to my printer, which ones would you recommend? Which ones can you do? And because the average consumer probably can't tell the difference between varnish and aqueous and UV. I always like when you put images and you spot varnish them, because it makes them look like much more like old school photographs. But anyway, so they laminated this piece, and they were selling laminators, so that makes a lot of sense. But they got almost no response at all. This wasn't sales. This was 3 leads out of 150,000 piece mailing. And so there was a lot of things I took issue with, but one of them was that they had this sale offer, and there wasn't really a sale in it, so it was disingenuous to put that up there. Somebody just thought by adding the word sale to a piece, it automatically would increase response. And actually, it can take away the credibility. But when you put sale along with a beautiful cover stock or a coating or gold foil, you don't want to make it look too fancy if you're trying to say that this is a value piece. And so we changed that, and it turned it all around by making it less fancy. So I always say test. You always have to test. Make sure to check your mail service provider to see if they can inkjet over the protective coating. That's another thing. Make sure they can put an address on it. A paper envelope can be inkjetted. Is that a verb? But poly bags will require labels. The more people who see your mailer, talk about it, and share it, the better your response will be. Sensory input leaves a lasting impression, but not all of it will boost sales. That's something to know. It's always a cost benefit. Okay, I was going to talk on purpose today, and there was an interesting article by Greg Hahn, and he says, this was a really interesting story. There was a form of punishment that used to be used on prisoners, which has been outlawed and declared torture, but they would have the prisoners go out into a field, dig a ditch for 8 hours. At the end of 8 hours, they would have to fill the ditch back in with the dirt they'd removed every day, day in and day out. The reason it was determined to be torture was not due to the physical nature of the task, but the mental. The sheer futility of the effort drove the prisoners mad. I don't know if that's true, but it is an interesting perspective. Does that sound like your job? I remember when we started using word processors to drive our typesetting, so we could make changes a lot more easily than when we had an X-Acto knife and we had to cut the word out and put a new word in there or something like that. And so I showed my boss the catalog, the copy layouts, and we had, our copywriter had been using manufactured pickup type, and he took the word gray. My boss saw that the word gray was sometimes spelled G-R-E-Y and sometimes G-R-A-Y, and he insisted that we fix all of them and make them all the same. I don't remember which. And so we did. We had a word processor. We could redo that, search and replace. And then a few weeks later, he noticed that they were all spelled let's say G-R-E-Y, it doesn't matter what it was. And he decided they all needed to be changed to the other way. And I think I wrote an article one time about how would we have done if we would have just left the catalog alone with all the typos and all the mistakes? Would it have really done any worse? And does anybody know? And does anybody ever want to test that? It sounds like, the perfection and the insanity of it. So anyway, the client will change it one way, and you argue for your way, and but you give in to their way, and then they change it back, insisting that it would be much better if it was the other way, which was what you had in the first place. So Greg says, there's a famous story about a guy watching a bricklayer day after day after day piling up bricks. And finally he went to him and said, how can you do this every day, day in and day out? How can you just pile up these bricks? And the bricklayer said, I'm not piling up bricks, I'm building a cathedral. And so Greg says, if you understand that your advertising job is building a cathedral because your company has purpose, you can be the difference between a laborer and a crafts person. I don't know. I think that's somewhat true. I think I try to improve the quality of marketing in the world day in and day out. And I enjoy learning and I enjoy sharing it with you. But I'm pretty sure that when you know what you're doing is adding to the mission, there's no wasted effort. But Zero Hedge says ultimately we're all going to go. And if you can tell me about your great grandfather, much of anything, that tells you what you're not going to find your purpose in necessarily in work or in publishing a book or in changing the world. Magical things can happen when people understand why they're there and why their work matters. But ultimately, your purpose probably is in a higher issue. And for that, we're not going to talk about it on this show. So we get over to Mark Ritson. It's a long article, 11 to 14 minutes. And he starts out with one of the investors, Terry Smith, criticizing Unilever's obsession with the purpose of brands such as Hellmann's. And Ritson's talked on this before. Peter Field in 2021 talked about how, in general, advertising that focuses on the purpose of the company doesn't do as well in impacting the business and selling the mayonnaise as advertising that just talks about how good the mayonnaise is. Okay, it's just the way it is. And then people got mad because the marketing world is very woke and said, but what about great purpose? Can't great purpose work? And so Peter went back and measured, looked at the best purpose-driven ads and found out that the best purpose-driven ads were better than average non-purpose-driven ads. Okay, you win there. But then somebody said, well, what about the best non-purpose-driven ads? Well, they beat the best purpose-driven ads. So in general, you're sending two messages when you're trying to communicate your purpose. If you're just going to say, our vegan mayo is the best on the market, and it's as good as our regular mayo. If that's your message, probably that's easier to communicate in a 30-second spot than you need to be vegan to enjoy mayo or something. There's two messages. If you try to sell vegan on top of your vegan mayo, you've got more to say, and it's more complicated. And some people will object to your premise, that vegan isn't really a purpose. And some people will object to your saying it's a good mayo. Whereas if you just say it's a good mayo, it's much easier to pull off. So, great article. You want to dig down into here. But generally, Mark is saying it's okay to have purpose. It's okay to have purpose and not shout about it. It's okay to advertise without mentioning purpose. we want everyone to, we want to insist that everyone needs to have purpose. And my problem with that most of the time is that it's not just enough to have purpose, but you have to have the right purpose. You know, it has to be diversity. I saw an article that I didn't cover about how some of the NFL coaches who are black are being changed out for new coaches. Well, it's something that always happens with coaches. When a team consistently loses, they fire the coach. Now you can applaud the diversity, but mostly coaching is about winning, and most team owners want their team to win. And so if you put diversity above winning, saying, well, we don't care if we win, we're going to have a coach of color, and they don't win, eventually you probably won't have that coach. Now, will you get another coach of color? You might not. It's one piece of the equation, and I'm not saying it's a bad piece. I'm just saying that it's not the only question. Colin Kaepernick, 2-14 his last 16 games or something. He can think that's about discrimination, but I think it was about consistent losing. And and if I don't win, it doesn't matter how much the color of my skin matters if I'm in the game to win. So you have to balance all that, and I think that's what Ritson is saying. You have to balance it all, and oftentimes here's weak non-purpose cases, purpose cases. Okay, this is too complicated for me, but basically the non-purpose cases win, even in the stellar category, and mostly in the weak advertising, the purpose-driven are well, it's complicated. Anyway, I highly recommend you download this, and some of you know that I've been battling a little bug here, and so just play this at double speed because it'll make it all go. Purpose is a strategy, and as a strategy, it's a strategic choice. You can talk about it. You may alienate half your market. That's your choice, right? Targeting is a choice. Objectives are a choice. You can go after the 1%. You can charge an enormous amount, make a profit. You can go after the 50%, who are below average net worth or income and have a low priced value at brand, and you can be very, very, very profitable. Both are a choice. And talking about yourself and your purpose and thinking that everyone likes it is probably a mistake, but some people will like it. And so you may get a more loyal small group that helps your profitability. Here's the part that's really interesting. The question is whether or not you should make it should figure into making money. And what everyone it seems wants to prove that purpose will pay. But if it's really a purpose, then in some ways it's more important. It's like if you have a football team and you say diversity is more important than winning. So we're going to have a lot of people from a lot of different countries on our team. But there are other perspectives. If you lose all the games, somebody may change that after a while. Why do marketers make the naive assumption that you can have your purpose cake and be paid for eating it too? Maybe it should cost you, but your shareholders may not like that. So you got to work that all out. Goals other than improved profits are exactly what purpose is about. So I hope I've clarified that, sometimes it's going to cost you. And if you want it to cost you, talk it up. Have a great day. Like and share. We've got a pretty good crowd already registered for the WDMA meetup next Tuesday, 2 p.m. Central. But there's always room because not everybody shows up, and we always have a good conversation, and the style consultant keeps everybody in line. So get over there, register. Also, these articles are available every day on the show notes at WDMA.com.